Thank you very much. I see our attendees have started joining. Thank you so much for joining our session tonight. While we wait for everybody to just get into the session, why don't you use the chat function and tell me who you are and where you're from. I will soon be introducing our speaker for today, and I'm quite excited about that. I see our first person is Janita from the Eastern Cape. Guys, keep popping into the chat function who you are and where you're from. Natasha from Centurion. Hi, Natasha. Caroline from Botswana. Nicole from Vanderbijl Park. I see our members are still joining at a vast rate. Terence from Durban. Hi, guys. Lucretia from Bloemfontein. Pujane. Welcome, guys. I really appreciate all of from Pretoria. Amber from Joburg. Rania from Cape Town. We're quite spread out tonight. Shanri from Potch. Thanks, guys. If I miss you, there's so many names coming through. Sikhle from the Eastern Cape. Siame from Cartonville. Tama from Joburg. Hi, everyone. I see our members are still joining, so I'm just going to give it a few more seconds before we start to introduce our speaker. In today's session, we might not have enough time to go through a Q&A as well, but if you do have a question, please pop it in the Q&A function and we'll see if we can get to it. Hi, Jenna from Stellenbosch, Sibongile from Grahamstown. We have Tyron from Oudtshoorn. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, I see our members are still coming in, so let's give it 2 more seconds. Alray from Pretoria, Lazizi from Cape Town. Thanks, guys. Menintle from Durban. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time. We know we're going to get these questions for members asking if they will be able to view this on recording, if they have any Wi-Fi problems. We will make sure to load it. So Anita, if you could maybe just let us know in the chat function where they'll be able to find the recording should they have missed it. Okay, so I have the great pleasure to introduce our speaker today. With us, we have Dean Cook. So Dean joined Genius Premium Tuition as a tutor while he was studying applied mathematics and computer science. And after over 1,600 hours of coaching and mentoring, he moved into education full-time as an education manager at Genius Premium Tuition. Dean has a passion for people, performance, puzzles, and problem solving. He is now the managing director at Genius and provides support and guidance to the education managers and tuition team. So thank you very much, Dean. We're very excited to host you, and I am going to hand over the floor to you.
Amazing. Thanks, Gillian. Yeah, welcome, everyone. Let me just see if I can get the presentation up on the screen here. Okay.
I can see it. Thanks, Dean.
Cool. Yeah, so it's an honor and a privilege to be speaking to the Golden Key members today. As Gillian said, my name is Dean, and I'm the managing director at a company called Genius. Really, we're speaking from a lot of experience today, a wealth of wisdom literature that's available, some of the best books that you can find in the performance space, podcasts, and then I'm speaking from personal experience. I've worked with many high school students in the academic coaching space. And in addition to that, we have quite a high performing team of tutors who've been very successful at high school and who have gone on to be very successful in universities. Many of our tutors are Golden Key members, and some of them have at times not been successful in the university space. And so it's from that kind of space that we are talking about all of the things that you can do to improve your academic space and as it said, dominate. So I'm going to head over to the next slide. Firstly, why improve your game? Yeah, I suspect I don't have to persuade you, you know, that you should become better and that you can become stronger. Because you've clicked on this link, because you've joined this webinar, you already have a sense that there is a way to be in the academic space that is better. But just to give you an insight, I mean, many of you will be competing to get into alternative courses. You might not be studying the thing that you want to be studying ultimately. Many of you will be competing to get into spaces in honors courses or masters, PhD, and so therefore you have to perform at a high level when it comes to your academic results. And then also success equals well-being. What do I mean by that? When you are feeling confident and competent and interested and connected to your work at university, that energy bleeds over to the other spheres in your life, right? I mean, you become a better family member, you become a better friend, you pursue your own intellectual kind of endeavors with just a different kind of mindset and energy. And so really, we believe that when you're successful at something like your academic space, overall well-being skyrockets. And so this is a key and a window to that. And then, like we say here, university is like a game or sport. I suspect many of you either will be or have in the past engaged in some kind of highly competitive, could be a sport or a video game, something where you can have a go, you can sort of just play and repeat and try and get better through that method. But the alternative, and you might have done this, is to step back and say, can I read some strategy around how to improve at this endeavor? Can I follow people who have been successful at this thing and see what are they doing that I'm not doing? And so really what you're asking yourself is, can I step back and take a meta perspective and discover things that I could be doing which will ultimately lead to a much better result for my academics? Yeah, so when I work with tutors and students, it's often like, I'm quite surprised often by how people seem to kind of not be interested in or not have kind of explored before the possibility that they could be much better in school. People often find it quite unlikely that they could have much more energy in the course of a day, that they could be much more effective at what they're doing. When you tell someone, I'm going to kind of teach you something which could help you to learn much faster, it sounds great on paper, but I often find a sort of skepticism that arises. And so I want to just kind of reassure you that some of the things that we're going to talk about today really can help you to become a much better academic. You can learn faster, remember the things that you're trying to remember for longer, understand with a different kind of depth the content that you've been studying, and ultimately achieve great results. So these are the 5 odd things that we're going to be running through today. Firstly, we're going to be talking about sleep as pertains to well-being, and running through a couple of tools, 5 to be exact, that you can use to drastically improve your sleep. We're going to be talking about stress management and autonomic arousal, what you can do sort of in the moment to walk into an exam or engage with an assignment in a way that is much more calm and clear and focused. We're going to be talking about life leadership, aka organizational skills or time management. We don't like the use of the term time management, just because it doesn't quite describe how powerful you could be. This isn't about the nitty-gritties of scheduling and how you can sort of fit everything in. It's more about a perspective that will allow you to be a lot more effective and get a lot more done. We're going to talk about spaced repetition, which is a key concept in learning that you might not have heard about, and we're going to talk about some applications of that, and then ultimately proactivity and how that fits into the whole equation. So I'm going to get going. Let's start with the importance of sleep. So in a minute, I'm going to ask Gillian to pop up a poll, but we won't do that yet. For us at Genius, high quality sleep means a couple of things. These 4 ideas: consistently getting between 7.5 and 9 hours of sleep, falling asleep easily. So what that means is at night, you're not finding that you're awake for long, or your mind is racing, your head hits the pillow and you're feeling very relaxed, and 7 minutes later or something like that, you basically transition into sleep. Sleeping through the night, in other words, you might find yourself a little alert in the middle of the night, but you're not waking up and finding it difficult to fall back asleep. Waking up easily, feeling refreshed. So this means not hitting the snooze repeatedly. This means in fact, ideally what this means is you're waking up a little bit before your alarm is going off, right? You're starting to feel alert just before your alarm goes off. And so that's what we would kind of mean by waking up easily, feeling refreshed. You feel like you've had a good sleep and you're ready to connect with the day. So the first poll item we have, which I'm going to ask Gillian to just pop up there, is how many of you are getting, according to this definition, regular high quality sleep? By the way, if you can see all of the questions, all 6, please ignore questions 2 through 6. If you can only see one, that's great. Please answer it now. I think you have about 30 seconds.
I would just like to ask our members to let us know. Okay, they say they can't submit without answering all of them. Dean, can we keep repeating it for them so that we just pull the data from the first one for this round? Perfect.
Yeah, so sorry guys, yeah, there seems to be a bit of a glitch. We've used the Q&A system a little differently than I'm used to. So please answer questions 2 through 6 randomly, and we'll come to those later on. We'll resubmit the polls. But if you could just focus on number 1 for now, that'd be great.
Here we go. I'm just giving it a few more seconds for our members. I see they are all still submitting their questions, so let's just give it a few more seconds for everyone to get that in.
100%. And yeah, just a reminder, the rest of the questions you can answer without really worrying too much. We will reissue this poll.
Okay, guys, we at 70% of participants that have filled it in. Let's give it a final push.
Cool. Yeah. So look, I'm happy with 75%, Gillian. I think that's fine.
Okay, we're already on 83, so I am going to stop the poll then for us.
Perfect.
There we go. Dean, can you see the results on your side, or can I share it with you?
I actually can't, yeah. But you're welcome to just perhaps read out the percentage. Oh, there you are, I can see. So, right, so it's as I suspected, okay, two-thirds of you are not getting regular high quality sleep, and 1/3, exactly 33%, is getting regular and high quality sleep. So great for those 33% of you. There may still be something that's on offer in this sort of initial chapter that we're going to be running through. For the rest of you, really, I think there's going to be a lot that we can work through. I'm going to work through 5 tips that could make a huge difference to your sleep and sleep hygiene, I think sometimes it's referred to. On our website, there's a blog that specifically runs through, I think, 13 odd of these. So if you find these useful, there might be more on offer. Number 1, if I can just click next here. No, that's not working. There we go. Okay, so many of you might have heard this already, right? So blue light is sort of a buzzword in the sleep space and in the health space at the moment, okay? The tip here fundamentally is avoid bright or blue light late at night. So first, just to say that blue light is actually not bad for you during the day, in the morning. In fact, as you'll see later, it can actually be quite good in terms of setting your sleep-wake cycle. But blue light after around sunset or close to bedtime, an hour, 2.5 an hour before, it does something. It basically suppresses the release of a hormone called melatonin. And this melatonin is a hormone that facilitates transition to sleep. It's not just blue light. In fact, any bright light, even if there are no blue frequencies in that light at all, will interfere with the production of melatonin. But blue light in particular, you want to avoid. So what can you do? Around 30 minutes to an hour before the time you have scheduled to go to bed, definitely turn your phone onto, could be called night mode or comfort mode or blue light mode. That's step one. Step two would be to turn the brightness down. Even better would be to dim the lights in your house. It could be your bedroom and the bathroom. Preferably, if you have a nighttime routine, sort of like maybe you're brushing your teeth, you should be doing it in almost pure darkness. And that's because bright lights just before you get into bed really do stop you from easily transitioning into sleep. So if you're one of the many people who find yourself mind racing, difficult to fall asleep, limiting your exposure to bright and blue light at night can have a very powerful positive effect on that issue. There's another thing to mention here. If you are waking up in the middle of the night, especially if you're waking up in the middle of the night, you want to at all costs avoid blue and bright light. You want to avoid turning the light on. If you go to the bathroom, you want to do it in darkness. If you're going to use your phone, although I really wouldn't recommend you use your phone, that would be an example of an unhealthy sleep hygiene habit. You should keep it very low brightness and the blue light filter on. So avoid blue light and bright light late at night and in the middle of the night if you should wake up. This is sort of one of the most impactful tips when it comes to improving your sleep hygiene. Number two, so watch the sunrise. In my experience, not many people have heard of this as an insight. And aside from being quite a nice sort of a Zen habit to have, something to build into your habit stack, something that you do daily, which sort of anchors you in the day. Aside from all of those benefits, physiologically, this has a real impact on your sleep that night and your sleep-wake cycle, which influences your sleep in the nights to come. So there is a specific quality of light that is available around sunrise. I think the sun is rising somewhere around 6 o'clock these days. And I imagine not many of you, perhaps about half of you, are awake around that time. And you know, if you are, even if you're awake at around 7:30, getting outside where you're not staring at the sun directly, but the photons from the sun have direct access to you, not through tinted glasses or through even a bedroom window. You're outside in the sunlight, in the sun's rays. That quality of light triggers basically a very important step in your sleep-wake cycle, which is the release of cortisol. Now, cortisol, many of you will know as the stress hormone. This is the kind of stress that you want early on in the morning. The alternative, so your cortisol is going to spike once every 24 hours. The question is, when do you want it to spike? If you watch the sunrise and you get this sort of physiological trigger, it'll rise in the morning and then decrease over the course of the day. The alternative is to not get this light, not get this cortisol spike, and then it'll rise steadily over the course of the day and peak somewhere in the afternoon, which you can imagine is not very good emotionally or mentally or physically, right? So triggers a release of cortisol. You don't need a lot of time in the sun, something like 2 to 4 minutes, depending on the intensity of light that you're being exposed to. Again, I want to clarify, please don't stare at the sun. That's not going to be useful. If your eyes are hurting, then you're doing something wrong. But just to be outside in the sunlight, it has an impact on that night's sleep, but even more importantly, the nights to come, because it's influenced your sleep-wake cycle. So watching the sunrise is number two. And number three is watching the sunset. So similarly, this can be useful as just a really nice habit to add to your stack, something to kind of anchor you and peg you in the day. But in addition to that, it has a physiological effect, and it's different from the sunrise. What watching the sunset does, again, this specific quality of light really does do something for your biology. And what it does is it mitigates, not completely stops, but it mitigates the effect of the blue and bright light that you will inevitably get in small doses of later on in the evening. So it sort of says to the body, it is about time to start slowing down and preparing for bed. And even if you do see light later on, the body says, I'm going to reduce the impact of that because I've had the sunset. And so I kind of know where we are in the sleep-wake cycle. So watching the sunset can be a great one. Very, very, very powerful tool. And again, I would recommend it even as just something to anchor you in the day and can be quite calming. Number 4, hot shower at night. So when I need to explain a bit of biology in order for this to make sense. Throughout the course of the day, from midnight or about 4 a.m. all the way up to the sort of afternoon, the ambient temperature is warming up, which means the body is warming up. And from about afternoon to about midnight or 4 a.m. in the morning, the ambient temperature is cooling down, which means the body is cooling down. Now, for many, many generations, it's been true that as we approach night, the body is cooling down. And as we kind of approach morning and wake up time, the body is warming up. Therefore, the body has learned that a really good indicator of when it should wake up and go to sleep is the body's temperature. So when your body is warming up, you're getting the signal that it's time to wake up and become alert. And when your body is cooling down, you're getting the signal that it is time to go to sleep. So why should you have a warm shower at night if that's the case? Because you would imagine that, like I just said earlier, as you heat up, you're getting the signal to wake up. But actually the opposite is true. When you have a hot shower, it triggers a very specific response. You sort of get a rapid cooling, a heat dump. And for the sort of hour, like 30 minutes to an hour and a half after the shower, your body is rapidly cooling down. And that's what you're looking for. So you have a hot shower to an hour to half an hour before you go to bed. Even though it says 30 minutes on the screen, probably an hour is better. And your body will just be cooling down from that point on, which is going to make a huge difference on two things. One, your ability to fall asleep that night. You all know what it's like to feel lethargic and sort of tired and calm after a hot shower. But two, it's going to advance your sleep-wake cycle. And so you are more likely to wake up earlier, or for your biology to support you waking up earlier. You're more likely to be supported in waking up earlier and going to bed earlier in the days to come. Hot shower at night, great idea. Funnily, a hot shower in the morning is the opposite of a great idea, and for exactly the same reason. And in fact, what we advocate for, and this is a more controversial tip, although some of you will have heard this, is number 5, a cold shower in the morning. So for a similar reason, but also another set of reasons that are useful and I'm going to run through, a cold shower in the morning is something that can be incredibly productive. For those of you who don't have cold showers regularly, even if it's a warm day, if you're not feeling too brave and you want to sort of try this in the afternoon on a warm day, do yourself a favor and have a cold shower and just notice how you feel afterwards. And on another day, have a warm shower and just notice how you feel afterwards. And there's no question that you're going to see a huge difference in how focused and energetic and engaged you are. A cold shower in the morning triggers the body to kind of respond with rapid warming. After you come out of a cold shower, your physiology is warming up. Therefore, you're getting the signal to advance your sleep-wake cycle. You're getting the signal to wake up and be alert, and that it is time to get going with the day. It does a couple of other things. Number 1, you get this release of some very useful hormones in the morning. This supports the release of cortisol. It also supports the release of adrenaline, which you'll all kind of be familiar with as the get up and get going and move hormone. And so that can have a huge impact on your productivity in the morning as well. And then the last thing which this can do, which is incredibly useful, and we'll sort of allude to this a little bit later on, is if you're getting into that cold shower, it's not easy. You have cold water hitting your face, your body goes into an immediate stress response. And that's kind of linked to the cortisol injection that you get. And in the face of the stress response, you have a couple of options. One is you could allow yourself to shiver and freak out a little bit. And it turns out that that's actually something that's quite good for weight loss, which is irrelevant to this talk. The alternative is you kind of slow yourself down, take a couple of deep breaths, you try and focus on the present, calm yourself down, and just tell yourself that everything's okay and re-engage and try and lower your state of stress and autonomic arousal. Try and get out of that fight or flight response. What this does is it trains your body and your mind to be very good under extremely stressful situations at calming yourself down. So your ability to calm yourself down in a cold shower will translate to your ability to calm yourself down when you're feeling anxious or stressed in any life event, whether it's an exam at university or not. So the stress training is a phenomenal outcome of this cold shower in the morning as well. So I hope many of you are going to try this. It's not easy, it can be a lot of fun. I can't say that I do it every morning, but it's something which could greatly increase and make you more powerful. Right, so we are now going to move on to the topic of autonomic arousal and stress management and anxiety and sort of a nervous, anxious response that many people get when it comes to either preparing for assignments which are coming, preparing for exams, even when you're in an exam, could be post-exam anxiety. So we have a poll question, and this is going to be number 2. And again, if you could just randomly assign answers to everything except for specifically number 2 on this poll that's going to pop up. I'd like to know how many of you feel anxious sometimes or stressed out sometimes in assignments or under exam conditions. So Gillian, if we could pop the poll up on the screen, that'd be great. Cool. So I'll just read it. Do you sometimes experience stress and anxiety that impacts your focus? And yeah, if you could all answer, that'd be excellent.
Dean, would you be fine if I stopped it again at about 75%?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
I think as a general rule, we'll sort of stop at around 75 to 80%.
Perfect.
Cool. So I'm going to scroll down to number 2. Do you sometimes experience stress and anxiety that impacts your focus? 96% yes and 4% no. Okay, cool. So I'm very happy about that. Although clearly something is kind of going wrong, really what it means for me is there's a tremendous opportunity here to solve this problem. So firstly, I'd just like to say that high quality sleep, regular exercise, general well-being in all domains of your life hugely contribute, even your diet, hugely contribute to the base level of anxiety that you feel and the peaks that you feel when in very stressful situations. And so firstly, you should get that as close to right, whatever that means, as is possible in those 3 areas. So sleep, we've only spoken about sleep today, exercise and diet. But there is something that you can do in the moment, which is backed by a lot of recent, very high quality peer-reviewed studies that can have a huge impact on your stress and anxiety in the moment. And it's something that you can do kind of wherever you are. It is a breathing technique. And I'm sure many of you are sort of rolling your eyes saying, oh, another breathing technique. This one really, and I'm going to explain the biology behind it, this one really has a huge impact on how stressed out and how anxious you are and your high level of autonomic arousal. So it's called the physiological sigh. Some of you may have heard of it before. You are welcome and encouraged to go and do research on it after this webinar. But I want to sort of explain some of the biology, and then I'm going to run through these steps. So let me just switch over to the, let me see here. There we go, the page here with the steps. So these are the 4 steps. I'm going to use the steps to explain how this works. And then we are actually going to, I'm going to give you an example one, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity along with me to do 2 or 3 of these. And so when we get to that part, I really would encourage you to try this at home. And you know, often when we do these as in-person seminars, I can sort of feel the room breathing. And so I'll just have to imagine that all of you are sitting at home breathing along with me. So why does this work? The first 2 steps are, number 1, breathe in deeply, and then number 2, breathe in again. So that looks something like this, preferably through the nose. Okay, why is that important? When you are stressed out and you are in the state of sort of fight or flight, a whole lot of the little sacs in your lungs have closed and have become unavailable for use in dispelling carbon dioxide and taking in oxygen. So that's a sort of a classic physiological marker of you're under stress, is that some of those little alveoli have slammed shut. You'll actually be familiar with this double breath. And if you think back to a time when you saw someone who was feeling stressed and anxious and claustrophobic, or having a panic attack, or even a baby throwing a tantrum, they sort of do this double breath in where they go, breathe out and then like that. That will be familiar to you. And that's the body doing the physiological side. It's basically, this isn't something that people made up. It's drawn from that response. Why the double breath in? The second breath pops those little alveoli open. It pops the little sacs in your lungs open and makes them available for use in expelling carbon dioxide and pulling in oxygen. So it's very important that the first breath is almost to full capacity. You'll be surprised how much more capacity you have on that second breath. And you can imagine that's because some of those little sacs have now become available. So it's a breath in and then a breath in. The next two steps are equally as important. And again, I think it's useful to understand the mechanism behind the tool so that you know how to use it and how to adapt it for yourself. When your lungs are full, in other words, when you have breathed in deeply and your diaphragm is sort of low and you have this kind of enlarged chest cavity, your lungs have expanded, but there's another organ in there that also expands, and it's your heart. Your blood is kind of moving through your heart as it pumps. And when the heart expands, you'll know that what happens to a fluid when it suddenly is moving through a much bigger cavity is that it slows down. So when your chest expands, your heart expands. When your heart expands, your blood slows down. The rate at which blood is moving through your body actually slows down. Your brain gets the signal that your blood rate has slowed, and what does it do in response? Well, it wants to speed it up again, right? I think it's called homeostasis. It wants to kind of get you back to a normal level. So it's going to send the signal to your heart to start pumping faster. In other words, when you are holding your breath with full lungs, your brain is sending the signal to your heart to speed up. And so it's beating faster and your blood rate is actually going up. For the opposite reason, when you have breathed out and your chest cavity is smaller, your heart will be smaller, blood will start going through faster, your brain will send the signal to slow your heart rate. And so when you've breathed out, your heart rate will slow down. The last two steps of this are important. They are to exhale slowly and then to hold with empty lungs, because for the majority of time in this exercise, you actually want to have empty lungs so that your body is getting the signal to slow your heart rate down, because when your heart rate slows down, you'll come out of that sort of anxious space. Now, you won't feel the effect of this immediately. You will feel something immediately, that's for sure. But the actual physiological effect of slowing your heart rate comes about 10 minutes after you do 3 or 4 physiological sighs in a row. So I'd like for us all to try it together. I'm going to do it, let's say, 3 times, and I'll sort of count the steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then I'll use this hand to indicate whether my lungs are full or empty, and we'll go like that. So number 1, I'm not going to talk while I do it. It'll be difficult to do that, so you'll just have to rely on my fingers. So let's go. Okay, cool. So many of you should be feeling some kind of effect, and this is something that can be done pre an exam, in the middle of an exam. You can do this 2 or 3 times. Unlike many habits, this is not a diminishing return situation. In other words, the more you do this, the greater the effect on your biology is, because your body gets used to using this as a tool to calm yourself down. So you can't overuse this. If you use this when you're feeling anxious, it's only going to become a more powerful and more useful and more effective tool. So that's the physiological side. Let's go on to the next step. Okay, cool. Well, perhaps before we do that, just to remind you, this is going to kind of slow the fight or flight stress response. It is really going to allow you to kind of be more present, increase your ability to focus, and just be so much more clear-headed in the moment. Right, so this is an interesting one, and really we use this tool to illustrate something which is important about your biology and your autonomic arousal. So I'm going to give you the tool. Even if you don't use this, I hope that it'll teach you something that will be useful in terms of the mechanism. So this physiological side brings you from a high state of autonomic arousal to sort of an optimal zone, let's say. If you use it when you're in an optimal zone, you might dip below and become too lethargic, too relaxed, and that'll have a detrimental effect on your ability to focus in the moment. So the idea is to not be so calm and unstressed that you don't want to do anything and that you can't bring yourself to open the books. The idea is to get yourself into an optimal zone so that you're not freaking out, blacking out, and just generally unable to connect with the work. Something else that you will have noticed really kind of chills you out and calms you down and puts you into a state of lethargy or low autonomic arousal is eating a very carb-heavy meal. You know what it's like after a very big meal or a very big meal with lots of carbs to feel a little lethargic and tired. That is your body taking you from an optimal autonomic arousal state to too low. But if you know you're walking into a situation like a big speech or an exam or an assignment where you are going to be stressed out, you are going to be too high on the scale, having a very carb-heavy meal or a big meal 1 hour before the exam can have a positive effect on your ability to connect with the work in the moment. This can be misused. You might do this when you were going to be in an optimal zone and so dip yourself below, and so be careful with it. But this can be a very interesting and sort of novel way to improve your productivity in very specific and niche situations. So starch-heavy meal, and I hope this kind of shines a light on or illustrates the effect that food can have on the body and these sort of states of stress or lethargy. Right, so now we're going to move into the space where we talk about life leadership and organizational skills. There are 3 key ideas that we have here, and the first one is called Big Rocks. So I am going to run you through a brief recounting of a story. The story really illustrates the point well, and so that's what I'm going to do. As it goes, there is a lecturer teaching some kind of performance management or productivity class. He pulls out a big box. Out of the box, he pulls an empty jar. And he says to the class, I'm now going to sort of fill this jar. From the box, he pulls a whole lot of big rocks and fills the jar to the top. It looks something like this, I suppose, that you see on the screen. He then reaches out to the class and asks, is it full? And many people in the class say yes, some people say no. He then goes back into the box and pulls out a whole lot of stones. You could imagine something like gravel, and pours them into the jar, and they fill the spaces in between the rocks. And again, he asks, is the jar full? And again, a huge proportion of the class is sort of indicating that yes, they think that the jar is full. He goes into the box, pulls out sand, box of sand, pours the sand in, fills the space in between the gravels, and finally asks, is the jar full? Many people still say yes. Some people are sort of wise to this now and have figured out that there are still spaces, so some of them say no. Last but not least, he cracks open a beer or a bottle of wine, something like that, and pours it into the spaces in between the sand, and it fills the jar. And now the jar is full. And I think before we kind of get to the key takeaway, I'd like to we have another poll question that I'm going to ask Gillian to pop up now. The question is, what is the key insight here? Gillian, if you could pull the poll up. What is the takeaway? What's the sort of quote unquote moral of the story? This is question number 3. Again, please ignore the rest of the questions by randomly clicking yes or no. What do you think is the lesson here? What's the moral?
Almost there, guys, waiting for the final people to complete.
What percentage are we on, Gillian?
66.
Okay, while people are answering, I'll just say a couple of you have asked questions in the chat. So if we have time to get to Q&A, which I really hope we do, although I find there's just so much work to get through and so much content to get through that we often don't have time. But if we do, we aren't going to be responding to questions in the chat. We'll only be responding to questions in the Q&A. So please do use the Q&A feature. It's a different button at the bottom of your screen to the chat feature. I did see some good questions asked in chat. I was just scrolling now while we were waiting for the answers. But please, if you could repeat those in the Q&A, that'd be great.
It seems some people have eaten a carb-heavy meal because they're taking longer to fill in the poll this time.
Yeah. So look, I think we could probably just jump into it. I'm not so phased about getting a high percentage of. Yeah, we're on what, like 70%?
We're on 71, so I'm quite happy with that.
Okay. Okay, cool. So if I go down to number 3 here, so 49% of you, 50%, let's say half of you have responded with you can fit more than you think in your day. 30% of you have responded with there's always room to do more. 14% you have to put the big rocks in first, and 7% you can always fit small items between big rocks. None of you, unfortunately, responded that there's always time for drink with friends, which actually really is the moral of this particular story. Okay, cool. So the majority response was something like you can always fit more in. And I'm pleased with that because it's the wrong result, but what it means is there's something to learn here. You can't always fit more in. If I pulled out of this box another big rock or another beer or another cup of sand, you would not be able to pour it in without something spilling over. The reality is you have 24 hours in the day, okay? Some of which you're sleeping, some of which you're driving, some of which you're eating. So although there is a lot of time, a lot more than people think, there isn't an infinite amount of time. So the real moral of the story here is you have to put the big rocks in first. Imagine what would have happened if he took about the same amount of materials out and started with the beer. He poured the beer in, then he poured the cup of sand, then the gravel, then the big rocks. It should be quite clear to you that not everything would have fit into the jar. The big rocks would have gone on top of the sand and it just would have been a complete mess. And this is a profound insight because if you kind of equate big rocks to the things which are important that you really want to get done in a day, the lesson is you must never let things, you must never let those things be at the mercy of the sand and the gravel and the stones. If you imagine, I have this important thing to do, I'm going to see if I can fit it in at the end of the day. Guaranteed you won't fit it in. It won't happen. But if you pre-schedule it in and hold yourself accountable to that and show up for it and be present and allow yourself to do nothing else except that thing that you've committed to doing, you will be able to fit in all the other urgent stuff which you imagine is holding you back from doing that thing you want to get done in between the cracks. You just will. It's a reality of productivity. So the real insight here is put big rocks in first. It's an idea from the book Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. Many of you will have heard of it. I've got a helicopter overhead. I hope that's not. Yeah, cool. There we go. So it's a really cool idea, and I'm going to tie it in with some other ideas later on. But the key takeaway: find out what your big rocks are, and basically schedule those in. What are examples of big rocks? I think I have some on screen here. So no, I don't. Big rocks would be scheduling a block of time for revision. You might think that an exam coming up or an assignment is a big rock. Preparation for an assignment is, but the due date isn't, and an exam isn't. Although it is technically a big rock, something that needs to get put in the jar, it is out of your control. You have to show up to an exam. It's not something which you could accidentally not schedule in and thereby avoid. So really what we mean is the things which are going to be very useful for you to do in the long term. They might not be urgent, but you're kind of creating a sense of urgency by pre-scheduling them in, and then you will fit all of the sand and water in around them. So that's what big rocks are. The next key idea that we're going to kind of learn about in this segment is systems versus goals. So this one comes from an author called Scott Adams. He wrote a book called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. Would highly recommend it. It's a great read. And the idea here, the insight that he has is that goals are for losers, right? Why is that? So he kind of points out that if you look at a whole lot of, if you look at some kind of endeavor, and you examine all of the people that were successful, but then you also examine all of the people that were not successful, the people that failed to sort of achieve that level, all of them had goals. Both the people who were successful and the people who failed alike had goals. And so goals can't be the differentiating factor. Even though people who are successful will tell you goals are important, that's a sort of a confirmation bias approach. You're not looking at the people who are unsuccessful. So goals won't do it for you. The problem with goals, and he cites two, and they're very useful to think about, is that they are future oriented. In other words, they do not serve our immediate gratification monkey brain, right? We're looking for something which is going to give us a kick in the moment. And that's the best way we're going to kind of build responses and habits is something that works for us right now. If you have a goal of just, let's say, passing your year or getting a particular kind of degree or diploma, or getting into a specific honors course, that is so far in the future that moment by moment, when it counts, it's not going to be as motivating as you might imagine. So future oriented. The second problem is that they are too specific. What do I mean by this? If you have a goal of getting a specific, let's say, a specific result for a course, or you have a goal of specifically getting a distinction, you might be disappointed in yourself if you get 2% below that target. And yet the result might be an excellent result. And so because they're too specific, they lend themselves to make you feel despondent and demotivated and disappointed, even if you've achieved something which is commendable and great and should actually motivate you. So that's the problem with goals. Instead, he advocates for systems, and we advocate for systems. Systems are a very different thing. They are actionable. They are things which you can do on a daily or weekly basis. They are activities. And how do you know if what you're talking about is a system or a goal? You ask yourself, is it operated or achieved? So here are some examples. Okay, getting a distinction. Do you operate getting a distinction, or do you achieve getting a distinction? It's something that you achieve, and therefore it's a goal. Do you operate passing a course, or do you achieve it? You achieve it. Do you operate graduating? Do you achieve it? You achieve it. It's a goal. These are examples of goals. Now, the usefulness of goals, again, I want to reiterate this, the usefulness of goals ends at providing some kind of a direction that you know you want to take in your life. And really, the next step is the execution, and that's where the systems come into play. So here are examples of systems which you can implement, and you can tell they're systems because they pass the operate test, right? Do you operate attending all the tutorials, or do you achieve it? On a daily basis, you operate the commitment to yourself that every time there's a tutorial, I'm going to show up and be present for it. You're operating that as a system. Do you operate taking out your revision notes every day, or do you achieve it? You operate it. It's something that you can actually physically do. Exercise every day. Again, from a more meta perspective, this is something which can have a huge impact on your academics. Getting high quality sleep every day, putting your gym clothes on in the morning, taking your yoga mat out. These are things which you can do every day. And if you see those as the thing to be achieved, you will get a kick out of doing it, and you will know that you're on the right path. Instead of not getting a kick because you're waiting for this goal, which is in never, ever, ever land, and getting demotivated because you're not coming closer. It doesn't feel like you're coming closer. Another final note on goals, and why they're not so useful, although we didn't have it in the notes here. Many of you will already have achieved many goals which you have set in your life. It could be goals for certain results in high school, certain accolades. It could be achievement in certain cultural or sports areas. Many of you will already have undergrads. Some of you will have honors degrees, master's degrees. If you think back to when that was the most important thing, and all you wanted to do was achieve that, and only how happy you would be once you had done it. And now think in retrospect about how you view that goal. In fact, the day after, the week after, maybe the euphoria lasted for a week. But how quickly did you move the goalposts and say, okay, but now I want to achieve this? So that's the problem with goals. Up until you hit the goal, you're a loser. You haven't hit the goal that you've set for yourself. By definition, you're a loser. And once you've hit the goal, either you're a loser without a goal, or you set yourself a new goal. So de-emphasize goals, focus on systems. What can you do practically? I've got a 4-step sort of system for you here. Don't do this now in the webinar, but maybe what you want to do sometime in the near future is write down a list of 2 or 3 of your most desirable goals. And then number 2 is cross them out. And instead, write down 1, 2, or 3 systems, design systems which will step by step take you closer to those goals. And basically, that's what you need to do. Once you've got the systems, what do you need to do with them? You need to make them big rocks. In other words, these are things which are not urgent, but they are important. You need to schedule them in, whether you use a Google Calendar or pen and paper or something on your wall. Block in these systems and hold yourself accountable to doing them on a daily basis. Effectively, make them big rocks and let the other stuff, the things which feel important because they're urgent, fit in around those events. Right. Last idea in this comment. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Many of you, and I'm sorry we didn't do a poll here, but many of you for sure will be waking up as late as you possibly can in order to get to your lecture or to get to whatever the commitment is. And this is a really bad way to engage with your life. And it's a really surefire way of preventing yourself from becoming powerful and productive in the world. So we suggest that you build a morning routine. You might need to wake up a little bit earlier, but if you're honest with yourself, you could afford to go to bed earlier, or you could afford less sleep. Like one of those 2 is true. And so we recommend that you figure out what time do you want to wake up. Wake up with enough time to fit in sort of personal me time. There's so many books that talk about this. Put your phone on do not disturb mode. That's what D&D means here on the screen. Don't allow yourself to go on social media or WhatsApp or YouTube or whatever it is, your emails. Don't check your university work. Take the time. And here's the thing, right? I've listed a couple on the screen: reading, watching the sunrise, exercise, meditation, yoga, journaling. There are so many things. It's a buffet. There's a buffet out there of things to choose from that you can kind of use to design your own personal routine in the morning. And one thing I can guarantee you, it'll be difficult in the beginning because you've got to form the habit. But when you're in the habit of regularly taking time to do personal me stuff in the morning, it sets you up for a very successful day. It allows you to engage with your day and your life in a very different way. And I suspect if you're not doing this already and you start, you're going to have a very different experience in life. Right, so I'm noticing that we are coming close on the hour now. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is spaced repetition. Spaced repetition is a key idea, which is something that, again, many of you may have heard of. It's fundamentally the idea that if you spend X amount of time trying to learn something, you would be better off spending less than that amount of time, but spread over many days. So the example I've given here is if instead of 16 hours, let's say 2 8-hour study days before an exam, if instead of that, you spend 30 minutes a day for 20 days in advance, 21 days, which overall will equate to 10 hours. Those 10 hours will yield a much better result than those 16 hours will. What do I mean by better result? You will remember what you learned for much longer. You will understand it more deeply, and you'll be able to recall it in the exam with a much higher level of precision. So that's the fundamental essence of spaced repetition is you can spend less time getting the same result, or you can spend the same time getting a much better result if you spread it out instead of doing it all in one lump. How can you use this? So first, we're going to talk about an approach to university that might differ slightly or even drastically from the current approach you're taking that could have a huge impact on the results you're getting. And again, I'm not asking you to invest more time here. You could probably spend the same amount of time that you are and get much better results using this technique. So the first 3 things are all around lectures, and the next 3 things are around consolidating and preparing for exams. When I say lectures, I mean classes, lectures, tutorials, any sort of event where there's an opportunity and you're in a learning environment. Step 1, before lectures. If you take a small amount of time before lectures to read the chapter summary, think about what it is you're going to be learning or what the person is going to be going through, consider possible questions that you might get asked in an exam situation or that might come up for you in that situation. If you just allow your brain 5 or 10 minutes to just think about this a little bit, the day before, not the morning of, or 2 days before, you are going to be leveraging a real sort of force multiplier, and that is your sleep. when you're asleep that night, your brain is going to be rewiring itself very subtly. If these 10 minutes are active, in other words, you're engaged with the work, you're frustrated about it a little bit, you're thinking about it, you're not just reading it, that's not going to help. But your brain is going to be opening up a whole lot of little slots into which, when you're sitting in that lecture, that information can fit a lot more clearly and a lot more easily. So some kind of pre-lecture reading can have a huge impact on your ability to engage with work in a lecture. Then, there's sort of two options here, and I'm going to talk about the first. You can take very effective and productive notes in lectures. This is in contrast to just sort of sitting and listening and not doing much. Taking effective notes can be very useful in a lecture environment. As long as you are taking notes that you know are going to be useful later, you're not just writing down everything that is being said, you're sort of, it's called determining salience and pulling out the things which you know are going to be useful for you to recall later. That's an option. An alternative, and you might want to try this before, before you dismiss it as not useful. An alternative is to not take notes in the lecture and instead spend every minute as if you were in a conversation with the lecturer, actively engaging with the work, thinking deeply about what they're saying, contrasting with stuff you already know about the topic, and sort of making mental notes and really thinking clearly about it. So often is lecture time not used productively that deeply engaging with the work in this time can have a huge impact on your university results. You can also ask, if it's on offer to you, you can also ask high quality questions in that time. And just that as an actual conversation can have a huge impact. Excuse me. Number 3, after a lecture, if you take time now, and this is the same day, preferably, maybe even the next morning, to, and this could be a 10-minute exercise where you then write down all of the key concepts that you remember from the lecture. If you've written notes, you maybe summarize the notes. You're reviewing the work, and then, and this is key, you're discussing it. Find yourself a peer at university who's studying the same course and discuss the content with them. Post-lecture, discuss what you learned in the lecture, debate with them, teach them an idea, let them teach you an idea. The act of teaching and discussing is an unbelievable way to solidify concepts and show up areas where you aren't so sure, where you might otherwise think, you know, you have a false sense of confidence. It can just be an incredibly powerful way to cement all of this stuff in your head. So number 3 would be after the lecture, and it's this sort of after lecture consolidation space, let's say. Then we separate preparation that you should do into 3 different kinds. And so that's what the next 3 steps are, 4, 5, and 6. Number 4 is a study session. This is not about studying to an exam. This is specifically about internalizing information, doing external research, looking at stuff out of the course curriculum that's still related to the topic or field that you're studying in this lecture, or that pertains to this lecture or module that you're working through. So this is really kind of, it should feel recreational, it should be interesting to you. You want to just do a sort of a broad, you want to do a read around with a high level of breadth and depth as well, perhaps even much deeper as a sort of initial cursory step than you're required to know. So these are called study sessions, and it's important that you schedule these in regularly to study the content that you're learning in lectures. Number 2 is a revision session. The purpose of this is slightly different. This is more about studying to the exam. This is about consolidating notes. You might make clear summaries, you might make flashcards. Here you're focusing on the details and the facts that are going to be examinable in an actual exam situation. And last but not least, number 6, and again, this should be separate from the other 2, are exam preparation sessions. So here, if you have access to past papers, although I know that's very rare, you want to do the past papers. If you don't, and you just have access to past paper style examination questions, you really want to do those here, and as much under exam conditions as you can. That means timed, if you're going to be timed, so under a certain amount of pressure. If you have if you have exams where you have certain resources which are available to you, then you want to have those resources available. If your exams preclude you from access to resources, then you don't want to be using resources in these sessions. So exam emulation as much as possible. These are about basically practicing the questions that you're going to be exposed to in exams. Right, so now I'm going to talk about digital flashcard systems. I mentioned flashcards earlier. Flashcards can be a very powerful way to connect with work because they leverage this forgetting curve. So let me just explain what's happening on the screen here. If I expose you to a fact, okay, or let's say I expose you to 100 facts all at once, and it's the first time you're hearing about them. These numbers aren't going to be exact, but it's going to give you a sense of the problem here. 10 minutes from now, you're going to have forgotten roughly 20% of those things, let's say. So in 10 minutes, you forget something like 20% of the content that you've been exposed to. If I expose you then again, the 80% that you remembered, you now know and you've been reminded of twice. And now I don't have to wait 10 minutes, I can wait an hour. In an hour's time, instead of 10 minutes, you will still remember 80% of that content. So the rate at which you forget content decreases with the amount of exposures that you've had to that content. And that's kind of what this forgetting curve illustrates. You can see here, when you learn something, that's the initial red blot, the percentage of it that you remember, the retention goes down drastically. But if you're reminded of it, the retention decreases less drastically, and then that curve flattens out. So you can be exposed to something and then be exposed to something again in 10 minutes, 1 hour, 1 day, 3 days, 8 days, and that time can sort of go up geometrically. The problem is, it is very difficult to take advantage of this using physical flashcards. I mean, imagine you make yourself 100 flashcards, you expose yourself to them, okay? Then in 10 minutes, you look at them all again. The problem is, yes, in theory, you could then look at them all again in a day and then in 3 days, whatever it is. But what you're supposed to do is the ones that you didn't remember, you've got to start the process again. So after a day, there'll be some which you didn't remember, and those need to start on the 10-minute, 1 hour, 1 day schedule again, whereas the other ones can go ahead. It's actually impossible to manage this in a physical flashcard system. And that's why you might have heard something about digital flashcard systems before, where all of that scheduling is handled for you. You just have to worry about showing up regularly and actually reviewing the cards and telling the system whether or not you remember this particular item or you need to be exposed to it again. For interest's sake, and this is the next poll, how many of you have heard of a digital flashcard system before, or used one? There are a couple, something like Anki is an example of one. How many of you have used a digital flashcard system before? Jillian, if we could pop the poll up on the screen.
Popping it in now.
Okay, so this is question number 4. Again, you can ignore all the other questions. Have you ever used a digital flashcard system before? It's either a yes or a no. By the way, once you've clicked yes or no to all of the questions, you do have to click submit at the bottom. Perhaps that's what's been preventing some answers from coming forward. Okay, cool. So thank you for that. Most of you know, so I'm pleased about that, because this really is something that could have a huge impact on your ability to retain information. These systems do not help with a depth of understanding and knowledge, but they do help drastically with retaining hundreds and hundreds of facts, often used for vocabulary when learning new languages. But I know of many medical students who use this to retain information, many legal students or BSc students, BA students, history students. There's just so much that's sort of on offer when it comes to remembering hundreds of facts. You can kind of think of this as a system which, if you had a list of facts, hundreds or thousands, and you had a USB stick and you could just sort of plug it into your head, that really is something like what these systems do if you use them daily. And you don't have to invest a lot of time. So You can learn hundreds of facts, basically in no time at all. You can remember them forever. And what's even better is on some of the systems, like I've listed two here, Anki and Quizlet, you will find that many people have made free resources available, and probably for your course or your degree or your module, there are a list of facts already available. You can download them and start. You might not need to generate them, is what I'm saying. Right, now, this sort of brings us to the last topic of today. I think we're gonna continue, although because of the time, we probably won't get to the Q&A, and that is proactivity. So often when I chat to people about proactivity and reactivity, the common idea is that proactivity is about solving problems in advance, and reactivity is about solving problems in arrears and reacting to issues that arise. That's not what we mean by proactive and reactive. It's a useful definition, but we mean something quite different, okay? And to illustrate that, I want to sort of run you through a key concept. When something goes wrong in life, you failed a test, you did badly in an assignment, you didn't get to an assignment soon enough, you missed a due date, whatever. When something goes wrong in your academic space or out of your academic space, there are a whole list of legitimate reasons why that thing went wrong, a whole list of external factors, things which you had no control over, which influenced the outcome in a negative way. How unlucky you are that all of these things happened to you. And the problem is, and the danger is, that they are legitimate. There really are things that are happening in the world which are out of your control, which have an influence on your output and your productivity. However, there are also a whole list always of internal factors, things which you did have control over, which you do have an influence on, which also influence the result that you got. And the danger here is, because these external factors are legitimate, they're real, they really exist, right? We don't live in an imaginary world where you are unaffected by everything around you. Because they exist, it is very easy to hide behind them. I don't even mean externally. I mean, it is very easy for you to miss the fact that there were things that you could have done to prevent a bad result. And so the essence of proactivity is completely forgetting about the external factors. You focus only on, you don't waste even a minute talking or discussing or thinking about what went wrong that wasn't your fault, that wasn't under your control, that influenced your result. No, you spend all of that time that you have on thinking about what did you do to contribute to the failure in this endeavor, or what did you not do that could have contributed to the success of this endeavor. Why would you do this? It's not about taking the blame, okay? It's not about saying, I'm such a bad person, I'm at fault, I'm feeling shameful. All of that's irrelevant. This is purely about solving the problem and getting a better result next time. So a proactive person is someone who takes ownership, someone who accepts responsibility for the things that are happening to them and to the people around them, and basically someone who doesn't blame external circumstances. On the other hand, reactive people assign blame. They spend most of their time thinking about all of the external factors which had an impact on their results, and they're just affected by their environment. You can kind of sense in yourself and in other people how proactive or reactive you're being by the language you use. Proactive language is I can, I will, I prefer. Reactive is I can't, I have to, if only I wish. Now, this isn't about always doing the thing, right? I mean, you could have scheduled in a big rock and not get to it in a proactive way or in a reactive way. Here's how you might not get to it reactively. I can't do this today because I have to help my friend with this issue that he's having. So you see, I can't and I have to. Those are markers of reactive thinking. The alternative to that would be, I could get to this thing today. However, I prefer to reprioritize and do this thing with my friend because he needs some kind of help, right? So same scenario, same outcome, but a different approach. One is reactive and one is proactive. If you ever find yourself saying, I'm sorry, I can't come to your party or your event, you're being reactive. You can, you could, you just prefer not to. And maybe you should kind of own up to that and start taking responsibility. It's very powerful. It's a very powerful effect, the language you use and the effect that it has on the way that you think and interact with the world. So the next key idea here is something called deciding versus wishing. And again, I mean, you look around at the people to your left and to your right, or in the lecture hall, or whatever it is, the fancy car on the road, the A that someone got, the big house that you're going for, the honors degree that someone got. You can look at those things and people and situations and wish that you had that, if only you could attain that. Or, and you can't do both, you can decide that that's what you're going to do. Now, how do you go about doing that? You figure out, what price are those people paying? What price do I need to pay in order to attain that result? That's number one. Number two, have an honest conversation with yourself about whether or not you actually want to pay that price. Sometimes you won't want to pay that price. And then if you decide that that's something that you can commit to and you can actually pay that price, then go ahead and pay it. And that's how you can achieve great things instead of wishing and hoping and dreaming. Excellent. So that's the core of the talk. I think the final message is, even if you do only one of these things or two of these things instead of all of them, if you just make a start, it can have a huge impact on your life and your productivity. I want to ask you guys, and if we could just pull up the poll, Gillian, this is question number 5, I believe. If you found this, yeah, go ahead. So I think number 5, if I remember correctly, is how useful you found this and some of the key ideas and some of the key takeaways. Again, you can answer randomly to all of the other questions, but I'd really just like some feedback on how useful it was. And Gillian has assured me that if most of you found it not useful or a waste of time, she's still going to basically make the poll results public. So I'm looking forward. Right, let's see. So very useful. Okay, looks like very useful is 74%. I'm not sure if you guys can see the results, and useful is 21%. Thank you. I'm very happy with that, and I'm very excited. I mean, again, these are things which I think can be very powerful. And it's one thing to hear about these ideas and write them down and get excited. We all know what it's like to make New Year's resolutions. It's another thing to execute. And I really hope that many of you execute on these ideas. Finally, I'm going to just pop over to the next page here, which is what we do. So Genius Premium Tuition and how we work with Golden Key. We are a private tuition firm, an educational management firm in Johannesburg and Pretoria, and recently opening up in Cape Town. We work in person with some of the best tutors. It's very difficult to get onto the team. You have to go through an application process. There's a training process. We take tutoring and mentoring young kids and young minds very seriously, and so that's why there's such a rigorous intake process. But once you're on the team, it's a great culture, a great environment to be in. The rates are great. You know, if you're private tutoring or if you're tutoring through a tutoring agency, you just can't earn nearly as much as you can earn as a tutor at Genius. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're interested, if you have time, there are part-time and full-time positions available. You can go to this URL here. You can use your phone on this QR code, or I think that's what it's called, a QR code. But the short URL is www.applygenius.com. And the last poll for you guys tonight is really just for my own interest. How many of you had heard of Genius before this webinar? Gillian, if we could pop up the last poll question. Again, you can answer the first 5 randomly, and I'd just like to see how many of you had heard about us in the past. Okay, amazing. Looks like not many of you had heard of us, and so welcome to the company, and thanks so much to Gillian and Natasha and Juanita from Golden Key. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you guys, and yeah, thanks everyone who attended.
Thank you, Dean. We appreciate your time, and you can see from the comments and from your poll that our members have really enjoyed it so much. We enjoy working with you guys. I urge all of our members to also keep an eye on your emails. We regularly send out information about Genius. So please go on here, have a look. You know that we only deal with top corporates as well. So please go and have a look if you have the opportunity. Dean, once again, thank you so much for this. We appreciate all your time and effort that you put into this presentation. And yes, we will make sure to let you guys know it will be uploaded onto our normal YouTube channel. So if you guys want to review and go through this again, you would be able to do so and build this routine. Thank you, everyone. You are now welcome to leave the webinar. You can press on the right bottom hand side of your screen, and we will see you guys soon.